cue up a little teaser so those of you who haven't seen it will understand what we're talking about. Thank you for your patience. It's one piece at a time. Thank you. Thank you everybody for being here today, and thank you to the speakers before me, both the amazing visual presentations and the movement that you did provided us. I think everybody's really set the bar here, and all I can say is I hope we continue to set the bar. I think what I, as a storyteller, try to convey both. I would say we, as Sibling Rivalry, lean a little bit more into the commerce of things, how we work with brands and agencies. In this case, And Design was built on the back of a pilot program called Samsung's pilot program, We Are And Design. And Design is an episodic art and design show hosted by the enigmatic head curator of the Museum of Modern Art, Paola Antonelli. Brian knows Paola, she speaks amazingly, she knows almost every artist. She has a number of shows, one just finished at the MoMA, and right now she's working on the next biennial called Broken Nature, which we're already talking to her about some VR opportunities. She tends to lean even more into more future technologies than VR, so we talk about moving forward with Paola, how do we stay on the cutting edge of everything. In And Design, Paola came to us, Sibling Rivalry. We have worked with her in the MoMA in the past. She basically wanted to create an episodic series that allowed her to be the host, to take the viewer to places where they can't go, the artist's studio. It's an anthropologic study. It involves science, history, technology, and obviously pulling back the curtain, on artists that you probably won't get a chance to go to. Whether they're in Melbourne, Berlin, MIT, or in New York, we had a chance to tell the story of And Design. Through the VR lens, viewers are introduced to creators. As I said, MIT is Neri Oxman. Neri created the death masks, which I'll talk a little bit about later, but a death mask inherently captures your last breath and mortalizes it forever, 3D printed with biomechanics and displayed. I think really the best way to see that is to watch the first piece, which is called Death and Design. The second piece is Self and Design. That's with the Imago camera. The Imago camera is a giant SLR that you can walk into and take a full picture of yourself. I think the amazing thing about the Imago is it provides full self-reflection, and Paola talks on that. The third episode is about robotics, a look at your future self. It's humanoids, and Hiroshi Ishiguro, who is a humanoid in and of himself. I'm sure you've seen him, whether it be on GQ or a co-brand of somebody else, but we got a chance to spend some time with him, and it was pretty fantastic. That was in Japan, in Osaka University. And then Pia Interlandi, who creates fashion for the afterlife. That's just sort of a little flavoring on what's to come. Each episode was about 7 to 9 minutes. We rolled them out as death, self, and death. They're pretty light, even though they don't really sound like it. Paola's amazing. She can't be here today, so I'm going to be here and tell you a little bit about And Design, and then happy to take questions. But right now, I'll give you a little sample.
What is a robot? That's a hard question. I could ask you, what is a human? The camera looks into your soul. What do I think of when I think of death? Like, everything is designed. If you look closely enough, there's a hidden story behind every object.
it's all immersive, but there's a bit of everything. And I think the compliment that I took when Brian introduced me is that when the first episode's over, you actually want more. And that's not something that I, as a viewer and as an engager, had ever experienced before. And so I'm proud to say that the feedback that we're getting is people actually do want more. It's a little bit of a history lesson. It's a little bit of a art class. It's a little bit of something you haven't seen before. And to us, that was always how we planned the journey. I think now that the audience is giving positive feedback on that, it's kind of working. You can't talk about death without having some people cringe. Anyway, how did it come to be? Paola came to us wanting to make a show. She brought this idea to our team. Our executive creative director, Mikan and Paola, had worked, as I said before, on a number of projects. Paola wanted it to be a 2D. She wanted it on TV. She wanted it on the channels. And she wanted it to be the Anthony Bourdain. I wanted it to be the New Yorker. And we sort of met in the middle, and it was this anthropological, interesting, textured story. And then Samsung knocked on the door and said, "Do you guys have anything? We want to run a pilot program." And so we very quickly pivoted and said to Paola, "We have to do this in VR." She said no. We said, "Please." She said, "AR." We said, "We can't right now, not on this budget." And then we negotiated down to, okay, here's 140 artists, and of those 140 artists, let's pick the artists that we're going to focus on. We went from basically 140 to 50 to 24. We presented 24 to Samsung. We came away with 6. The themes, as you saw scrolling through, those were all the themes that the artists were under. So we created buckets under themes. And from that, we wound up with death, self, and bite. And as you saw, there was nothing about food in here. So bite got axed when we went down, and finally got the approval of death, because not everybody in the chain of socio-political commerce wants to talk about death. So I take it as a pat on the back that Samsung VR, I don't think anybody's in the room right now from that party, did a show on death. That's pretty ballsy. But the thing that Samsung kept asking us, no matter what the topic was why in VR? And we very much took that as our challenge. We're a design studio located in Lower Manhattan. We're on the corner of the last block in Little Italy. New York has a lot of energy, and we said, let's use some of that. So the first thing we did is we took the Samsung VR camera, and we took it to the MoMA, and we spent a full day filming with Paola all around the MoMA. And we didn't use a single look of that footage in the final project. It was an experiment to see what we really needed to focus on. And when we figured out what that was, it was going to the artist's location and then going inside the camera, going inside the mask, going inside the robot. And that's really what we found worked for us as a model. The source material was endless. Paola isn't an endless supply of art. She loves the 99-cent water balloon thing that fills up 99 water balloons at one time. She'll talk about that in the same breath she'll talk about Hiroshi. She's fascinated by design, and I think we try to be a mirror on that fascination. We also wanted to challenge ourselves to guide the viewer through the story and not just have them observe and look around and get lost. There's been a lot of conversation about that. The team from Google spoke about that. And not using Unity on the majority of that project, we really had to design a theatrical type of direction with which the episode guides you, pulls you down the path and the story that you want to tell. That, again and again, was our challenge. How do we tell the story so we don't exhaust the viewer? How do we tell the story so we engage the viewer? And how do we get them to want to watch the next episode? That was, once again, our challenge. How do you then, asking the question, how do you do that in an artist studio or in an artist garage? And we went about that a couple of different ways. With the use of some computer graphics, some visual effects, but we also layered footage. So if a 360 camera was sitting in the middle of the room and Pia Interlandi was talking to you about a subject, she might be here talking directly to you, and there might be a cue, whether audio or she might say, look over here, and all of a sudden Pia's over here and over here. And there's a couple episodes throughout the program where there's 8 of our artists, there's 8 of our artists walking around an environment, and that's engaging because you feel like you can see part of their process. So once again, how do you keep the viewer engaged? For us, it was show the artist in everything they do in a condensed timeline. So no matter where you look, you're going to see the same, hopefully, cool process is really what that was about, showing the process. We tried to bring the viewer from real to surreal. Some of what you saw was the actual footage from MIT of Neri Oxman's team, mediated matter. They take chemical last breath, turn that into biochemistry, which is then 3D printed. We took some of their footage and had to adapt some of their footage. So we had a collage part of our storytelling. We had a live action part of our storytelling. We had a visual effects part of our storytelling. And for us, covering on all those different types of storytelling really allowed it to be anthropological and really sort of followed up on who Paola is. One other thing that we had to do is, because it was a show, we wanted to anchor it in an opening and a closing space. The idea that you as a viewer are comfortable knowing that Paola's introducing you and she's outroducing you. She's saying welcome and then she's saying next up. So that was actually the first lobby that we saw. Is there a way to turn off the audio?
Is there a way to off the audio?
On the no. Okay. So we created a lobby so that the viewer watching episodes 1 through 4 would feel comfortable coming back and seeing the space that felt comfortable. And in that lobby were well, it started as 140 different objects, and each object was relative to one of our themes, and those themes are displayed in here. So in theory, in the 2.0 version of this, when there's more time and money, you can go up to all of these objects and either engage with them or touch them. But right now, we presented this in a very dimensional, but yet non-interactive fashion. Our goal and Paola's goal is to take this room and someday make it interactive. Imagine walking down that aisleway and touching on all those elements. So the room was an anchor, and the anchor allowed us to tell the stories in between. And that was something pretty beneficial for us. We scripted the hell out of the show. We knew what the leading questions were going to be. We knew how the series would roll out. We knew what we wanted to do to make the viewer feel uncomfortable or comfortable, and then take them back into uncomfortable. The subject matter for us wasn't only a story to tell, but it was a journey, and obviously, in this market, you have to make it immersive. And design introduces you to your future self, your humanoid. It guides you through capturing the creation of the last breath, and it picks out fashion for afterlife. It all started with Paola's idea. We selected the artist, we wrote the script, we auditioned the artist, because not all artists are well spoken, so sometimes we had to audition them beforehand, give them the leading questions, really prep them for their on-camera performance, because we only had one shot at that. We went around the world one time, our team did, I should say, and it was a very small unit, and they were able to capture everything. They brought it back up to the studio in New York, and in the studio in New York, we also filmed Paola in the gallery, in the lobby as we called it. So she, at the beginning and the end of the episode, walks into the lobby and introduces you or introduces you. So once again, we created these chapters that hopefully felt like an Anthony Bourdain travel show, rest in peace. It was a chance for us to give you something familiar to come back to. So that hopefully someday you'll go to the landing page and there'll be 50 episodes and you can decide if you want to talk about love and design or bite and design or something else. Really, with Paola, the options are endless. Finally, we brought it all together in post. The team that I have in New York and that we work with really starts with the editing. We took the scripts back, we edited the scripts audio first, just a radio edit, so that we all would be happy closing our eyes, and if you were seeing nothing, it was fulfilling. Once we had a fulfilling radio edit, we then moved into the visual effects part. We edited the VR material, we then started with masking and layers of VFX right onto that. And at the end of it all, the CG, the stitching, the sound, the composing, the teams that went into it, you'll see when you watch it tonight or tomorrow, just the list of credits is amazing. The amount of people that had their hands on this, all around the world, the support team. I feel blessed that, that this happened in a way that I think reflected the vision that Paola always wanted. The feedback so far has been that. The entire production from start to finish took 9 months. We produced 4 7 to 9 minute VR episodes, and they all live on the Samsung VR platform, which Samsung is now also taking and partnering with other distributors. For us, this was a labor of love, a labor of finance, and a labor of art. I think there was a collision of the 3 of those things. Sibling Rivalry lives in a world where commerce meets art. The core of us is design. Whether we're making a silly commercial or a piece like Design, we try to infuse design into and through everything we do, and hopefully that comes through in how we communicate outwardly. With Design, we have the opportunity to bring artists and art to people and places that individuals would never go. These are the first 4 episodes. We've got more in development, and right now we're working with partners to figure out who and how. Obviously, they're brands, they want to infuse themselves in one way or another. Samsung's talking about more. We're trying to figure out how, if a brand does infuse itself, how do we keep it quelled so much so that the art and the story are the story. We don't want it to distract. I don't think we're going to be able to take brand money to distract from the story. It's definitely something that we keep separate from this kind of thing. We ran this project like a studio, though, in terms of TV development. And that was pretty fun for us. We really put together a team. That team plugged and played different creative directors, different technical directors, all through the process, depending on what was needed. We delivered the final episode, I think it was last week, to Samsung for tonight's premiere. I'm not totally sure, but that was a pretty good feeling. We had a little wrap party. But it felt like 9 months is the birth of a child. It felt like we sort of delivered that, and now, moving forward, we're starting to see partners, both distributors, brands, to figure out how to tell all the stories in Paola's head. We are also obviously exploring the 2D version of this to see if the TV networks are interested in having this or a version of this in the show, as a show, excuse me. And I think moving forward in the immersive side of things, we all have a desire to figure out how to push those technologies. How do we push the storytelling? How do we push the distributors to really use what's available to not only bring the viewer closer, but to fulfill them in a way that is, I've used anthropological earlier in the panel, and I feel like that's the best way to tell the story. It's really something that wants to fulfill you in a way that hopefully Naveen did as well with his artwork, and the Google team did. I think what's great for me as an executive producer who likes to see stories come together is all these things are inspiring. You inspired me earlier, the Google team inspired me, the panel inspired me. I produced one of the 5 Samsung pilots, and none of them were the same. And sitting in the room with that team earlier today was pretty interesting to hear the team talk about robot making friends, and me talking about art, and somebody else talking about Freud. The only thing I can think of is, wow, we live in a really amazing world where story is the leading edge to this arena, and I think, if you can continue to do well-produced projects, which is really what we pushed ourselves to do, and I'll only speak for us, hopefully the story will follow. I think that's it. If you haven't seen it,